from the post office. There you go.
Have everyone introduce themselves.
Oh, wonderful.
Well, you can introduce yourself to them too.
Okay, I'm Reese Stringham. I spent the last 32 years at the AG's office. I mostly did like insurance defense litigation. I spent some time most recently representing the insurance department from the AG's. And I have the very good fortune of having the commissioner ask me to take Brett's place, so here I am.
Yeah. Cool. Welcome.
Thank you.
So where did Brett go off to?
Brett, I think tested the water to see what he might be worth, and found out that he was worth a lot more than we were paying him.
Well, if you're in government in Utah,
Did you hear that, Reed?
you can really figure that out pretty fast.
So he took a job with NCCI, which is a rating bureau that puts together worker comp rates for all states. And some of you may be familiar with the work that they do, but he working as a regional vice president, and he'll be home officed out of Salt Lake, but they're saying that about 60% of his time will be traveling. But he only has Utah and Nevada right now, so I don't know if they weren't planning on giving him additional states. So he'll be managing a region. I don't know what that region's going to be.
Nevada, Wyoming, and Utah. No,
Okay.
Nevada, Hawaii.
Yeah, I thought he got Hawaii.
That's why Hawaii, not Wyoming. Sorry.
Yeah, there's a big difference between Wyoming and Hawaii.
I know.
A big difference.
I was just mentally blocking Hawaii. It's probably part of it.
That's right.
My apologies. Yes.
He,
Nevada, Hawaii, and Utah.
He didn't tell me. He told me I couldn't tell you how much he's making, but I will say we couldn't even come close. It's embarrassingly. But what I will tell you is that he was at the national meetings representing NCCI this past week, and what he did tell me was that people didn't know that he was interested in leaving. When they found out that he was gone, there was a lot of expression, and so he may not be at NCCI long. I don't know.
Anymore, maybe.
Anyways, so with that, I just would really like to express appreciation to Reed and Angie, and you do too, and to Jake and Heidi and Suzette, our team. Nancy, we do a lot, and I hope. I hear from people outside of Utah how much companies and inside the state, how much they appreciate working with our teams. And, we try to be regulator friendly. It is a position that the governor would like us to take. My disposition is that the more health insurance companies that I have writing business in the state, two things should happen. One is that rates should drop because of the competitiveness, and two, service should improve because of competition. So that's good for consumers. So we appreciate that you're here. We wish that more of you were in our state. We certainly look forward to hopefully with what's happened with recently and with federal issues, that perhaps we will become a little more competitive, and things might be a little more insurance company friendly, but who knows what Washington is. Anyways, with that, I'm going to stop. And let's go around the table and introduce ourselves for Reed's benefit.
Nancy Asperland.
Kelly Atkinson with Uhaya.
Randy Crook with Molina.
Ryan Smart with EMI Health.
Michael Peterson, I'm Kelly.
Russell Trujillo, they just say health insurance company. Mark Reese with Aetna.
Tina Thomas with WMI.
Steve Oxley, Regents. John Neville with Equitable Life and Casualty.
Jake Sunberg.
Angie Northrup. Heidi Clausen. Bethany Knight. Great tie.
Oh, thanks.
Do we have anyone on the phone?
I thought you'd comment on
I don't
that.
know.
I don't take any credit. It was a gift.
Well, I thought you were gonna say your wife dressed you.
Well,
That too?
Well, Doug is out of town, so Kelly, if it's okay, I'll
Not,
go ahead and.
don't look at
run
me,
through
you're the
agenda.
boss.
Okay. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll motion.
Great. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Any opposed? New pending rules.
Have any new or pending right now?
Okay.
That's
Now
music to our ears.
that the session's over.
Now, I think it's,
Now that the session's over, the work begins on that, so we'll have something for you, as the feds would say.
I think that leads us really well to, number 4, the rates filing schedule. Have we heard anything about when you anticipate the feds will make a final decision and you guys will have rates and form dates?
That was a very painful meeting at NEIC. We have 6 people from CMS, the Style, and the Department of Labor, and they can't say anything.
Okay.
And you've got about 30 regulators sitting here around the table staring at them saying,
Yeah.
when are you gonna finalize this and this and this? And they can't, they didn't even say soon, honestly. So they don't have any dates yet, but, I mean, they've got to get them out.
Yeah.
Jake, do you have any insight from,
They have to have them out before the issuer meeting on the 11th, right?
or they'll show it on the 11th?
What are they gonna do?
We really thought that they would have it out before the meeting with them, at NEIC.
Yeah.
So, who knows?
What is the delay? Are they just not sure whether transitional plans are continuing
They
or?
won't comment on anything. You ask them about transitional, they can't comment on that.
They were just warm bodies there. They seriously did not provide.
I mean, I think it was really difficult for them also, but
Yeah, I think they were in a hard spot.
yeah.
That's where it really is that they want to put something out and
So
their hands are tied.
they were quizzed on association health plans, short-term plans, filing deadlines, you know, everything, and reminded that you issuers need to have this information to adequately prepare for 2019, of which filings are going to be due soon. And they said they understood, but they can't provide us any additional information.
And there was a recent AHIP announcement. Was this talking about the short-term rule they don't think will be finalized until possibly after our rates have to be? So. The timing is terrible on that. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be, well, yeah, because they have 90 days after the comment period. So they have, okay, so the comment period ends, then they have 90 days to finalize it. The comment period ends on April 23rd. Yeah.
And they haven't always held fast. Prior to the Obama administration, they did not hold fast to those deadlines. So that's kind of a waste.
Okay.
what's the short-term rule?
So last October, the the White House issued an executive order that they were going to do proposed rules on association health plans, short-term limited duration, and then what was the third? Or the HRAs. And so the idea would be to make it so that they could potentially be up to 364 days, renewable, some of these other types of things. So they're soliciting, right now, they're soliciting comments
They look like anything but a short
Yes.
duration.
And there are some questions that came up at the NAIC regarding the 1557
Oh, non-discrimination?
non-discrimination related to that, because they've been applying that 15 to 57 pretty broadly under the Obama administration. And if you apply it the same way that they wanted to apply it, then you would say anybody who's offering a marketplace plan or on or off exchange wouldn't be able to offer one of the short-term limited duration plans, because the short-term limited duration plans can't meet the 1557 requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're receiving any monies from the federal government on the others, so they're going to make some clarifications on that, or they better make some clarifications on that. And I worry that if they do apply it the way that it has broadly been applied, then we could see some fallout.
Well, and I think the types of carriers that would be eligible, probably.
Right, well, I think there's also a distinction, just because full disclosure, our CEO has said this publicly, like Aetna's looking into what the short-term plan market is going to look like. There is the option, at least on the 1557, if you have kind of a license stashed that has no affiliation with any federal programs, you get away with just kind of from a license standpoint offering on that. So it's not anything that does have any kind of Medicaid or Medicare or exchange nexus. But that said, I mean, we're still equally confused about the timing of the rule and what's going to go into it. Aetna's drafting comments right now, kind of talking about you need to set up some minimum standards in these benefits so that they're not. You got to figure out a way via the regulatory structure to weed out kind of the bottom feeders. Otherwise, like you said, you were just opening up a whole new manipulative plan type that can really get sideways in a hurry if you look at tax experience on some of the short-term plans. So it's really interesting to see. I know the NAIC, not to completely derail us from our conversation here, but I know the NAIC is considering a model short-term plan rule. Is that, what's your view of kind of the timing and the direction that might go in based on the conversation going along?
Yeah, they're going to revise, I think it's Model 170, to put in a section just to the short-term plans. And I suspect they'll get on that right away. One thing to remember is Utah did have laws in place and regulations on short-term plans prior to the ACA. And to the extent that the Utah law applies once the federal law changes, those will still be in effect. So one thing Utah law says, at least for the short-term plans, is it cannot be more than 364 days and it cannot be renewable. Doesn't mean a person can't reapply and go through underwriting again and have that policy reestablished, but we do have those laws in place that haven't been enforced because of the short-term requirement down to 90 days. So ours was not more protective, and so we have defaulted to the short-term rule at the federal level. But we also have benefit standards in Rule R590-126 that would apply also to these short-term limited duration plans. So to the extent we're able to enforce Utah law, that will still apply.
Thank you. APCD, a question came up from one of our members dealing with the new Medicare rule on new Medicare cards not using the Social Security number. The APCD still requires that we submit that, and there is some, obviously privacy worries about whether, and the trend moving away from that, whether or not the department may be interested in working with the Department of Health on removing that requirement, given the kind of direction of the industry.
And a follow-up, and Tangi, thank you for putting me in touch with the Health Department on that. They responded that basically the rule is written right now, so a carrier shall submit everything that's required in the data submission guide, or whatever the catchphrase is, unless the carrier does not have the information. I forget what the exact phraseology is. I'm just wondering, so if we don't have a Social Security number, or a member, obviously, then under the data submission guide, in theory, we're already covered by the rule, but given the movement of CMS nationally away from Social Security numbers, I'm just wondering if we should make a bigger effort to call this out if the department's interested in that from a privacy standpoint. Or
So the data submission guide, I assume, includes the Social Security number. And so did the Health Department have any comments as far as changing that data submission guideline to remove that
They
requirement?
didn't seem to. They seem to just fall back on the catch-all of the rule that said if a health plan justifiably does not have the information, they're not required to submit it. So I guess you could say that for a lot of our Medicare-related members, now we won't have that information, so we justifiably don't have it.
Right.
But then it's always something that's collected in the past, so I would just hate to see the department turn around and say, well, you still have the right to ask them and collect it, even though that's clearly a different direction than CMS is moving.
So I can look at our rule and make sure it's clear enough to allow that for you not to submit it. But several of you in this room also sit on the Health Data Committee.
Right.
And I would recommend that you push back through that also.
Not having the APCD have the social security number does limit its use. It makes it difficult to track a person from one carrier to another and track their data from one carrier to another. And that is one of the benefits of having the APCD is so that you can have longitudinal data on one person.
Back in my memory bank someplace, I thought that Cheryl Allen sponsored a piece of legislation that said the state couldn't use social security numbers in any manner for public documents.
They're not, I don't think it's a public document though.
Yeah, it's all internal. It's internally used in the APCD, so it's more
Okay,
used
so the
as
law
a
may,
mapping,
you're
and then-
thinking the law doesn't apply.
No, I mean, so we
okay.
collect social security numbers, but
But
no one has access to them.
Okay,
They're specifically protected under grandma.
yeah. I think the big, as I've heard this issue discussed, the big issue is we don't have a national number other than a social security number on a person. And how do you track that? How do you identify a person? How do you make sure that they're done? So that's part of the challenge, I think, they're trying to address. Nobody thinks in today's modern world it's a good idea to have social security numbers out there, but we don't have any other way to track an individual in insurance, for insurance purposes. I mean, individual companies do. Individual.
Maybe that's one thing to take it off the ID card. I mean, because no other insurance card has it, and you're prohibited from putting it on there. So, to what extent they're able to collect that data still and submit it. But I think it's a great topic to have at the data committee level.
I don't think that Medicare is ceasing to collect.
Well, I think Medicare would have.
I think they would have the social security number.
They should have access.
Right.
So I don't think that it's being.
Never
it's
assume.
not displaying it doesn't mean that they don't
Yeah,
have
they're
it.
collecting it.
They're collecting it. Every insurance form that I have ever filled out requires the social security number on it. So I think it would be
Yeah,
a fairly
somebody fills that
large.
out. Stop filling that out.
Well, if it comes from the insurance company directly, I usually fill it out, but in other instances I don't. But I think it would mean a fairly large change in the industry to stop collecting. Right.
Well, and I know even going back, and I wasn't part of the establishment of the APCD here, but I was on the initial establishment committee in Colorado 7 years ago, and we had the same conversation of like, do you create a unique identifier now for the database, or do you continue Social Security? So I know this issue has gone round and round, and I know Reed probably in your past life from the AG's office perspective, like privacy concerns around this stuff are significant. So I do, Jandy, I'll definitely, as a group, we'll go back to the data group, but it'd be nice to see the state think through a way to move away from that. If federally there are signs that Social Security numbers are no longer going to be the norm given the privacy risk involved.
Are you proposing a state-based identifier?
No, I'm not smart enough to even come up with that proposal, nor do I have an idea how much that would cost. Assuming it's not cheap.
Well, I can count to 2 million or 3 million. So I can just go around and assign it if that's what it is.
Yeah, start at 0, 0, 0.
Yeah, no, Wyoming's gonna do that, and,
Well, I'll put a UT in our.
there you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. But it's definitely, and I know that even if you try and use other sets of things like name, birth date, other combinations of data factors that would naturally be involved in any kind of claims database, you still run into errors there and get mixed up and mismatch.
But we are in a day and age where a photograph or an image image could be used as an identifier as well. So if they did want to move to fingerprints, probably could, or an iris scan.
Yeah.
Yeah, try that. Yeah, let's just, there's a good representative
on right now and talk
representative
about
here
that.
can tell you about fingerprinting and how well that flies over in that building.
You know, and it's been a while since I've looked at what the Utah requirements are for the APCD, but what I remember is that the state is not, I guess, the Department of Health, right? Department of Health is not collecting Medicare data, right? I don't believe they collect Medicare.
They collect Medicaid data.
Yeah.
Medicaid.
And I think they collect some, I want to say they collect Medicare Part D data.
I think they do.
I was going to say, I think they collect
They're getting
some
some, not all of it, of
D,
course.
maybe.
They get directly from C, yeah.
Any other discussion on this topic before we move on? Everyone's favorite then, arches.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Now that I'm just looking at that typo on APDC, and I figured that was all Pecos to Washington, D.C. As you know, we made an assessment to our carriers. You probably are also aware, some of you represent those companies. They disputed our assessments, and so we are currently in the courts. I don't know that other than that, if there's a specific question from one of you.
Have multiple carriers challenging you on that?
Yes. On multiple issues, so we'll see what happens. The primary one is the formula that's been used, and the year timing in terms of placing the assessment has been challenged. Whether Medicaid, the company's writing Medicaid, is that correct, Angie, the way that Medicaid was applied in the assessment formula? So that's the primary. So, and you know, I hate to see more of Arch's money go to attorneys. But, you know, I wish it were different, but it's not. It kind of surprised me, got me off guard. This would happen. I don't know what will happen. I don't have a crystal ball. Read on the team to help us work through this as we can. I just don't know. So anything I would say is just, you're wise not to. I wish I knew. I wish I could say more, but
So, Commissioner, does the new guarantee legislation that passes, does it address some of the issues that are being challenged?
it just draws them into the guarantee association. I'm not sure it addresses. It's a good question. I can't answer that.
I mean, I think where we're working our way through it, that might be something that we talk about. You know, UHIA took no position on the percentage as far as default on the long-term care companies, but if there's something there that is being addressed that needs to be clarified, I think we ought to get that clarified going forward.
Sure, that's great.
So that, because we know that there's going to be defaults in the future. We know that. I mean, we hope for the best, but that's why you have a guaranteed association. We ought to get with Representative Dunnigan in the future if there's something
Probably
that
the
there's.
first thing I do is get with Ted Lewis, and he knows their system of allocating, and I think it'd probably be good to look at how their allocation works. Is what we've done is we did away with this model over here. So we're pulling you into this model now over here, and just make sure that the guarantee association model is going to address I'm not gonna say are gonna be made fairly, just gonna be made according towards the model that we have over there. No one likes it. It's unfortunate. It's just unfortunate. The HMOs weren't having to pay for 20, 30 years. They didn't pay a dime into any associations. They weren't putting money aside for it, and there weren't assessments. And now all of a sudden the big ones hit them, and they're crying foul. We shouldn't have to pay. And we heard during the session, we heard Select Health say, well, we have to pay this big assessment, so we shouldn't have to pay over here. I've said too much.
Yeah. Well, all I want to tell you from our perspective, and I think you know this, but the big challenge that a lot of carriers are having with arches is within 3 months, 4 months, the people that I respect, the much brighter than I am, many of them are sitting around this table, said they can't survive. This business model that they put together and the way that they're marketing, they will not survive. And so from the get-go, that was within 3 months of the way that they operated, the way that they marketed, the way that they started promoting. Brilliant people that run insurance companies were saying they're going to fail, and now they've failed, and they have to bail them out, and that's a bitter pill. Just so you know, that's a bitter pill for people that
22 or 23 failed. It's not
right.
just our state.
Right.
Yes,
And they were set up a little bit to fail. And not originally, but they weren't funded the way that they had originally been planned. And you pulled certain things out from under all
the
of
rules
these
changed midstream, and it was unfortunate. A Republican. I'm not going to say anybody's dysfunctional, but it's unfortunate the rules changed. And maybe the model, the co-op model, might have been successful had the original plan stayed in place for 5 or 6 years and given opportunity, but they weren't. And as a result, the whole purpose was to create co-ops that would be heavily subsidized to drive prices down. That's the model. Could have it worked? It wasn't given a fair chance, in my opinion. I never liked it from the get-go. A lot of people, and that's the problem. There's so much dysfunctionality in DC right now. Is that a line is drawn, and people tend to sit on that line and blame each other, and it's unfortunate. But, we're having to do the best that we can within our state. And, this state's been incredibly blessed. We have seen prosperity that other states just haven't seen. And to a certain point, we just need to sit back and thank our God that we have been successful in this state. We have had high employment. That real estate has been, and interest has been low, and that jobs have been strong, and that we have been successful in this state. And I will forever be grateful that for my tenure as an insurance commissioner, it's been relatively easy. I have not had the department under the stress of cutting budgets, and we have seen a lot of prosperity and strength coming out of this recession, and even during the recession. But it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate this company failed, and it's unfortunate Penn Treaty failed, and we have those debts looming in the background that are going to haunt us. As an industry, we will do the best that we can to survive. I wish it was different, but it isn't. We have to deal with it. People who are suffering the most right now are the docs and the hospitals, and I'm not sure they're suffering at all. I don't know, I hate to say that, because, you're on, insurance agents miss those commissions. We're never gonna get that money back to them, and you've felt some of their pain. Been on the front line and heard them talking to you, and there's significant commissions that weren't paid. I can see Steve nodding his head, he knows, I know. Yeah, thank you for what you can do, what help you can do to get these things resolved fairly and quickly would be certainly fine. I don't want to see it in the courts, that's the commissioners. We'll be meeting tomorrow. As you know, we've been out of town, but Reed and I and our liquidator will be meeting tomorrow to look at options to see if we can do. Thanks for bringing that one up.
Who put this agenda together?
I was not legislative issues.
Yeah.
Well, we've got one of those coming up on number 7.
Yeah, so there's an existing law dealing with mandates imposed after 2009. As you guys all know, this year we passed a telepsychiatric consultation mandate, and so some of the carriers, including Regents, were curious, what does one plan mean under that law? Is it one plan for us as Cambia? Does that mean one plan as a corporate entity? Does that mean one plan for each of our licenses, line of business? I know which one we'd prefer, but...
Well, I know which one that we thought when the legislation went into place, which was that we had to make an offering in one of our, if we had 5 plans, we had to make an offering in one of those plans. That was the original intent of the legislation, and I guess, that's UHI's position on it, but Steve's question is still important because we want a great working relationship with the department, and ultimately, if there is an issue here, it's going to be adjudicated by the department. Somebody's going to come back and say, what does this mean? And the reason I argue that is it just doesn't make sense that the legislation doesn't make sense if one plan is Cambrian. It doesn't make sense. Why would you pass a piece of legislation like that? The whole reason of the legislation was to say, going forward, if we pass additional mandates in the state of Utah, that an insurance company, in order to have some flexibility, will have to make that as an offering in one of their plans, but not across all lines.
So the law was passed pre-ACA, and when it was passed, Kelly, I completely agree with what you're saying on what the intent was, other than it being just one plan. So if you have an insurer in the individual, small player, and large employer market, I would expect that insurer would have one plan for each market they were in to offer to that market. So by saying only your large employer product, you have a plan available with that, you don't have anything to make available to an individual. The ACA came along and it added different definitions for what's a plan, what's a product, but I still look at how the law was written in Utah prior to the ACA and what the intent of that was. So you have an insurer in the individual market, and you have QHP plans and you have non-QHP plans. You still can offer just one plan off exchange with the benefit, I think, of being in compliance with Utah law. That individual doesn't have to buy QHP on exchange. They have the choice, and it's still available to buy a plan. And so that's why the prosthetic benefit that we've looked at in the past is it doesn't have to be an essential